Hey there movie lovers, welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're plunging into the high-octane world of the 1997 James Bond thriller Tomorrow Never Dies. Packed with jaw-dropping stunts, slick gadgets and a villain as cunning as he is charming, this film took Bond on a globe-trotting adventure that kept audiences on the edge of their seats. But how much do you really know about what went on behind the cameras? So, down your martini, start up the beamer, and let's explore 20 things you never knew about Tomorrow Never Dies. MGM authorised Bond number 18 during the final 10 days of GoldenEye's production, as the studio aimed to align the film's release with its public stock offering in 1997, creating intense pressure to meet the deadline. Novelist Donald Westlake wrote an early script centred on the British handover of Hong Kong to China on the 1st of July 1997. In his version, the villain stood to be ruined by the handover and planned to raid Hong Kong's vaults using a submersible vacuum, the precursor to Carver's sea drill, before destroying the island with a chemical compound. Although considered too controversial, the filmmakers still wanted Bond to return to the Far East. Westlake later adapted this rejected script into his published 2017 novel Forever Under Death. The film was originally titled Tomorrow Never Lies, which suited the plot, as media mogul Elliot Carver, played by Jonathan Pryce, was orchestrating the next day's headlines in advance and then making them happen. However, a typo on an early draft was adopted by the producers, resulting in the title Tomorrow Never Dies. Elliot Carver was originally named Harm's Way, but although Tomorrow Never Dies was an original story, the filmmakers feared the name might offend the family of Esmond Cecil Harmsworth. Harmsworth owned the Daily Mail and was married to Anne Charteris, who later became Mrs. Ian Fleming after an affair with the Bond's creator. Ironically, Anne had once expected to marry Fleming after her first husband died in the Second World War. But reluctant to give up his bachelor life, he prompted her to marry Harmsworth instead. Though Elliot Harmsway became Elliot Carver, Bond's affair with Paris Carver still echoed elements of Fleming's own romantic history. Accustomed to performing almost all of her own stunts in the Hong Kong action films for which she was renowned, Michelle Yeoh initially tried to do the same in Tomorrow Never Dies. However, director Roger Spottiswoode was insistent that it would be too dangerous. Nevertheless, aware of Yeoh's formidable reputation, the stunt team persuaded Spottiswoode to hire Jackie Chan's stunt crew. This enabled Yeoh to perform fight scenes alongside Chan's team, which was managed by Philip Chung Fung Kwok, who also made a brief on-screen appearance as Carver's partner in crime, General Chang. Major Boothroyd was intended to have retired before the events of Tomorrow Never Dies, making way for a new MI6 quartermaster. Discussions took place regarding Desmond Llewellyn's future in the role, and it was agreed that a new Q would be introduced. One proposed scene had Bond leaping onto a yacht in the South China Sea to find Desmond fully retired and surrounded by 3 beautiful women. The idea was for Bond to remark on Q's seemingly luxurious retirement, only for him to reveal that the women were actually his granddaughters. A formal retirement scene was also considered, but Llewellyn himself had no wish to step down from the role of Q. Determined to film in Asia, the filmmakers identified Vietnam as a strikingly different location for a Bond movie. Initial negotiations with Vietnamese authorities were promising, but just 2 days after a container ship carrying equipment had departed from the UK, permission to film was withdrawn. Bangkok, Thailand was then secured at the last minute to stand in for Vietnam's most populous city, Saigon. The Sin Sathorn Tower in Thonburi, representing Carver's headquarters, was the tallest building in Thailand at the time, but digital enhancements were used to make it appear even more imposing. Alan Cameron also replicated part of the tower and constructed a Vietnamese street at Eon Studios. Unfortunately, not all things were thought of. Some of the signs on the streets still have Thai writing on them, and when Bond and Lin crash through the skyscraper window, all the extras are speaking Thai instead of Vietnamese. I guess the world was a bigger place when this was made, and they thought nobody would notice. An arms bazaar on the Khyber Pass had originally been planned for the Living Daylights in 1987, but the sequence was ultimately scrapped due to time and budget constraints. For Tomorrow Never Dies, the scene cost around $11 million and lasted only 4 minutes. Chris Corbould rigged multiple missiles to fire from the Aero L-39 Albatross, each guided to its target by wires. He explained that during the rocket attack, they destroyed a missile launcher, a helicopter and a truck, emphasizing that the effects were real rather than miniature. A jeep was engulfed in a huge fireball, with director Roger Spottiswoode insisting that nothing charred should remain after the explosion, demanding complete demolition. To simulate the Royal Navy cruise missile destroying the terrorist arms bazaar, Corbould's team orchestrated 30 smaller explosions using 400 gallons of petrol and 30 pounds of dynamite. Meanwhile, Pierce Brosnan filmed his close-ups in a sawn-off L-39 cockpit against a backdrop, despite suffering from the flu. James Bond's high-altitude, low-opening jump over the South China Sea was filmed near Las Vegas, Arizona, and over the Florida Keys. The stunt was performed by veteran Bond stuntman B.J. Worth, who had been part of the franchise since Moonraker in 1979. Worth completed 80 jumps to capture 007's parachute-assisted dive to locate the wreck of HMS Devonshire, reaching speeds of between 120 and 200 miles per hour head first. Fixed-frame shots were employed to convey the sense of rapid descent. But while Bond activates his parachute 200 feet above sea level to avoid radar detection, Worth opened his much earlier. A special camera lens was used to make him appear lower. It was first proposed that Elliot Carver's wife should be Sylvia Trench, Bond's early lover from Dr. No in 1962 and from Russia with Love the year later. Pierce Brosnan backed casting director Debbie McWilliams' suggestion of Monica Bellucci for the role, but the producers rejected her as she was still relatively unknown. Sella Ward, then 39, also auditioned, but was told the producers wanted someone closer to 29. In the end, MGM chose 32-year-old Terry Hatcher, already a household name thanks to Lois and Clark. She accepted partly because her husband, John Tenney, encouraged her to take on the role of a Bond girl. Sir Anthony Hopkins had initially turned down the role of Augustus Trevelyan in GoldenEye, but the Bond producers later secured him to play Elliot Carver in Tomorrow Never Dies. However, Hopkins left after 3 days, as the screenplay remained unfinished, with new pages being produced daily. Pierce Brosnan later described the production as being like pulling teeth. Hopkins subsequently joined The Mask of Zorro, directed by Bond alumnus Martin Campbell. His fellow Welshman Jonathan Pryce eventually took on the role of Carver. Hatcher was 3 months pregnant during filming. Unaware of this, Brosnan initially complained about her lateness, but apologised once he learnt that she was suffering from morning sickness. Her pregnancy also meant the love scene was significantly shortened. She later admitted regretting the role, calling Paris Carver such an artificial kind of character that you don't get any special satisfaction from. 7 cars featured gadgets and appeared during the Hamburg car chase. Their wing mirrors and windscreens were fitted with monitors, enabling stunt driver Steve Griffin to control them from the back seat. Although a fire crew was present while filming the chase in Brent Cross Shopping Centre's car park, concerned shoppers called the fire brigade after seeing smoke pouring from the vehicle. John Richardson created a miniature BMW 750iL to be digitally inserted falling into the Langmuren in Hamburg. The car that crashed into the Avis storefront was fired from a 30-foot high ramp mounted on a lorry already 20 feet above the ground. Roger Spottiswoode drew inspiration from Sir Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps from 1935 when he handcuffed James Bond and Wai Lin together in Saigon. He deliberately placed Bond and Wai Lin on a motorcycle to avoid competing with the iconic tank chase in GoldenEye. French motorcycling expert Jean-Pierre Goy doubled for Brosnan, while Wendy Leach doubled for Michelle Yeoh. Goy refused the use of safety wires for the 44-foot leap over Carver's Eurocopter from a 45-foot high balcony. Consequently, the helicopter's rotors were added optically in post-production. In the original script drafts, Stamper was intended to have a brain injury that caused him to perceive pleasure as pain, and vice versa. The concept was ultimately abandoned, but a version of it appeared in the following Bond film, The World Is Not Enough, in which the main villain is unable to feel pain. Writer Bruce Fierstein originally named Henry Gupta after a Los Angeles bakery, imagining him as an Indian man in his late 20s. The producers, however, were so impressed by magician and sleight-of-hand expert Ricky Jay that they cast him instead, reinventing Gupta as a former 1960s radical turned hacker who now sells his politics for cash. Ricky Jay asked Fierstein to keep the character's original name. Gupta was initially meant to wield playing cards as deadly weapons, inspired by Jay's 1977 book Cards as Weapons. A deleted scene showed him practicing this skill while awaiting news of HMS Devonshire's sinking, and another featured him nearly striking Bond with a lethal card at the CMGN headquarters in Saigon. Both sequences were ultimately removed due to the film's tight running time. Pierce Brosnan was struck in the mouth by stuntman Steve Dent's metal helmet during filming at Eon Studios. Makeup artist Bron Roylance initially thought he was simply dirty, but soon saw he had a deep 1-inch cut on the right side of his face. Director Roger Spottiswoode called the injury serious, particularly with Hamburg filming due the next day. Brosnan joked that a Harrison Ford-style scar might even help his career, and he did not blame Dent, admitting he had moved when he shouldn't have. British pop group Pulp composed a theme song for the movie, but it was ultimately rejected by the producers. The track was later released as the B-side to the group's single Help the Aged, under the new title Tomorrow Never Lies. Producer Barbara Broccoli invited longtime Bond composer John Barry to return for Bond 18, but the two could not reach an agreement on his fee. Despite this, Barry recommended David Arnold to score the film. Arnold eagerly followed in Barry's footsteps, drawing inspiration from his scores from Russia with Love and Goldfinger. The stealth ship featured in the film is not entirely fictional. Lockheed secretly built a similar vessel in the early 80s. The prototype, known as the Sea Shadow, measured 160 feet in length, and the ship in the movie closely mirrors its shape. Much of the model work and underwater sequences were filmed in the Titanic tank at Fox's Baja Studios in Mexico, just days after Titanic had finished production. Both films were released in the same week in the US, making this the only one of Pierce Brosnan's 4 James Bond films not to debut at number 1 on the US box office charts. Here's a fun previous connection with a side of déjà vu. Vincent Schiavelli's character is a hitman who kills Terry Hatcher's Paris Carver. Funnily enough, Schiavelli had previously played a hitman in an episode of MacGyver from 1985, where he again pursued Hatcher's character, albeit with less success. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about Tomorrow Never Dies. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.